So everyone often tells you, be yourself. People will come to you. Everything is going to be great. You're going to share your niche, your this, your that. But what if you have never actually been able to be your authentic self? And so you're rediscovering that for the first time. And now you kind of don't know what to do because you've also stayed hidden for most of your life because people are okay when your giftedness and your intelligence benefits them. But when it comes down to you actually like being yourself and showing who you really are, then you get labeled as weird or rude or too much. You guess? So I want to walk you through how I have been working on that because again, all of the lessons that I've shared so far also lend themselves to the systems at play that also perpetuate a lot of that rejection, so to speak. And that's not necessarily the word that I want to use, but that's the first thing that comes to mind. So, I mean, if you're comfortable with me being vulnerable and actually sharing the things, I would absolutely love to have you stay for the series. But of course, we are going to be talking about a book in the process with the series. Oh, please. So I listened to this audiobook called Break the Cycle by Dr. Mario Bouquet, and it was so good that I had to buy the print version. For me, I have been struggling for years to feel accepted because I have always been that kind of nerdy, whimsical, happy go lucky person. And to be honest, a lot of that was taken away in childhood because, that's weird and we don't do that or we don't behave that way. And even being bullied and teased in school and being around people that weren't confident in themselves and constantly dimming myself down, it really got to a point where it was 10 times easier to just hide and fade in the background than it was to continue to push through and share my voice. And when I even when I got to corporate, the same rang true. You work and work and work and do and do and do, and people still don't see you as a person and they don't care about the contributions that you have made. They're more so concerned about the bottom line and you just you're you feeling sweat, huh? And I will never forget when I was at my last corporate role and I was asking a lot of questions because it was a big implementation. We were about to use electronic health records for multiple hospitals, and there were only 7 of us to do all of that work in terms of just getting these hospitals ready from an education perspective. And my former manager said, Ebony, sometimes you come off sounding like a blubbering idiot. And I paused and I looked and I said, I think HR would really like for you to repeat that. And I left shortly after that with no job in mind. I do not recommend doing that, but there's only so much that a person can take. And a lot of people say, leave your personal life at home when you show up to work, but that absolutely comes with you to work. All of your insecurities and your fears and all the things that shows up in the workplace as evidenced by the many, many horror stories that we often hear that come off as satire. We've all had an experience in some way, shape, form, or fashion with those types of people. And the reason why I bring up the book Break the Cycle is because it's talking a lot about intergenerational trauma and legacy building and understanding how, like, grieving that traumatic lineage. And my next goal is to read the book Post Traumatic Slave Syndrome because I realized very young, growing up in Detroit, seeing the things that I saw, having the experiences that I've had, I wasn't interested in whatever that was. I was not interested. I had no desire to fit in. I had no desire to be like my environment, and I wanted out at a very early age. As a child, I wanted out. And it wasn't until I got older that I started to realize, all right, the abuse, the trauma, all the things that I've experienced, there's something to this. But I couldn't quite put my finger on it because I didn't have the language for it. And obviously, when it comes to school, when it comes to Detroit public schools, I wasn't learning a quarter of the things that I have even taught in my series on diversity, equity, and inclusion in health and wellness spaces and healthcare spaces. These were things that I experienced firsthand, especially in a healthcare setting, especially with my mother, especially with my father, and all of my family members. But again, having that language by studying and learning and reading and understanding and experiencing different things helped me figure out language and figure out where to place the feelings and the emotions that I had on top of going to therapy. Highly advocate for therapy. So here are the top things that I really started to work through, especially being someone that left home at an early age and not having friends that really paid attention to what was going on. But baby, when I left and I didn't move in with one of them, and the people that I ended up staying with didn't fit what they thought it should be, my best friend to this day told me, Ebony, you needed to do what was best for you in the moment. And the fact that they never saw how much you were struggling says a lot about them. So I say all that to say the things that I will be going over in this series will obviously be, once I find this book, sharing some of those things that I have learned and that I have processed, applying it to friendships, applying it to family, applying it to grief and trauma, and understanding how to take all of those experiences and try to find new meaning, and finally allowing myself to be and be who I am. And I think that's one of the most important things that we can do for ourselves and future generations. And that is why I want to continue to do these series. And to be quite frank, if only one person sees this series, I am super happy for you. Welcome to Being Weird with me. And I'm excited because behind that polished front that so many people that you know, like, and trust have, many of them have struggled with battles that they have never shared with you because it's never been safe to do so. They've never been able to be themselves because they couldn't be held in that time. And so many people often get so shocked and surprised when people die by suicide, and it's like the symptoms and the signs were right there, but because they didn't present the way that you thought someone who is struggling should have presented, you didn't pay them no mind. And I've had those moments many times. And if I could just sit and be that mirror and bear witness to you watching this, to remind you that you are loved. And I do want that weirdness, that whimsicalness, that fairy that you have inside of you. I want you to feel safe enough to let that come out, even if you start with just you. So welcome to the series.